Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Conversational Witchcraft with me, Dawn the Kitchen Witch. Before we get going, this is your reminder to make sure you subscribe to this channel. And if you like what I'm doing, you can now go and support me. You can click the support us button. You can buy me a cup of coffee. You can donate to this podcast. And that will help me continue to bring you great information and inspiration. And don't forget that if you want to hang out with me online or you want to find out more about me and my books and food magic and the power of kitchen witchery, you can visit me directly at cucinaaurora.com or follow me on any socials at Cucina Aurora. All right, without any further ado, we have the very lovely, very patient, and kind Holly Bellebuono today. Holly is an entrepreneur and herbalist of 30 years. Through courses, workshops, and retreats, she guides people to think creatively about success and business and healing and purpose. She's a regular contributor to Llewellyn's Herbal Almanacs. Holly is also the author of Llewellyn's Little Book of Herbs and The Healing Kitchen, which explores food for healing and medicine, which I love. So, Holly, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Super
Hi.
happy to be here.
I'm so grateful because I had to reschedule with you like 100 times. And you have just been so kind. So thank you for being here. And it
No,
turns
looking
out
forward to it.
we're kind of neighbors because I'm in New Hampshire and you're in Mass.
hmm
Are you like,
Both New England.
yeah, are you native New Englander?
No, I'm from North Carolina, from Asheville, actually.
Oh, and
hmm
Asheville, I have a good friend that lives there and she really suffered some damage with that last hurricane.
Oh, it was terrible. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
mountain girl. My family is all there in the mountains and they're all fine,
Okay.
thankfully. But it for the region, it was terrible.
Really rough stuff going on. Climate stuff is real. Right?
It's no joke.
No joke, no joke. And as people that work, like for you working in herbalism and me working with food, like I think we're often those folks that are more in tune with what's going on because we're working with Earth on a regular basis,
Yeah.
right? And we're really going, hey, it's getting a little crazy out here.
hmm
So what brought
There's
you to Mass?
changes happening.
Yeah, what brought you to Massachusetts?
I've been here 20 years now, so I've been here a while.
Yeah.
Um, And this is where I started well, I had an herbal apothecary, a very tiny one in North Carolina that I called Sweet Cicely Herbs. And that was my very first venture as a brand new herbalist. And when I moved here, I live on Martha's Vineyard, so it's an island off the
Wow.
coast of Cape Cod. And I happened to squeeze in as another herbalist had just moved away, the other herbalist. So I became the island's herbalist and opened up my new apothecary, Vineyard Herbs, Teas and Apothecary, and ran that for more than a decade and produced teas and salves and all the fun stuff.
Are you still doing that now?
No, I sold the apothecary to one of my herbal students, who is a labor and delivery nurse midwife. So she's running it now. And I'm running my herbal medicine school. It's an online school with curriculum.
Wow. Okay. So here's the thing. I have heard of this herbal apothecary on Martha's Vineyard.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I like people have been like, have you heard of this place? And I'm like, no, I don't go to Martha's Vineyard very often. I think I've been there once since moving to New England from New York. But I have heard of this place and I have had multiple people say, you have to go, you have to go. Wow, that's you. Well, that
Or it
was
was.
you, and now
It
it's your
was.
legacy,
Yes.
which is still pretty amazing. How in the world did you get into herbalism? From where you grew up,
Well,
like what was your first?
when I was a kid, I really wanted to study plants. I wanted to join 4-H. I wanted to be in the greenhouse in the high school, and my parents would not let me. They thought that was a non-starter of a career choice. Um, they wanted me to do something that would be more economically viable, basically. And you can't blame them for that because, to be honest, trying to be an herbalist is really difficult and you're not making huge income.
Yeah.
Most of the herbalists I know are also nurses or also something else. So my mom is she's a retired nurse. She worked in surgery her whole career. And
Wow.
my dad's a retired pharmacist. So they were both very into anatomy, physiology, chemistry, medicine, healing. And that's what I grew up with. All of my aunts and uncles and cousins are some sort of therapist or nurse or something. So it's a very medically oriented family. And I just love it. I'm fascinated with health and the human body and anatomy. And then when I was in college, graduate school actually, in Boone, North Carolina, I took a side job working with a garden landscaper to help pay my way through school.
Oh, wow.
And he turned out to be a hippie who taught all of us on the landscaping crew about edible and medicinal plants. And I was just thrilled to know that the weeds we were pulling out of people's yards were edible, and then to learn about the medicinal qualities of herbs and trees and berries and leaves in all sorts of habitats. It was brand new to me. And so then to combine, botany and plants with the health and anatomy that I was already immersed in, it just made perfect sense. It was just a calling.
Yeah. I love that so much. And I am not an herbalist. I do like a little tiny little bit. Like I'm a kitchen witch. So I'm all about food and anything that is closer to the earth that's grown, that's as fresh as humanly possible. And I do a little bit with culinary herbs. I do a little bit with I make teas for myself and stuff, but I've interviewed quite a few herbalists. And it's interesting to hear how in almost every single case of a person that is like has the calling for working with plants, it is a calling. It's vocational. It's not like I didn't choose this career out of a book in my, high school career book. It's like, no, I had to do this. Was that
Mhm.
for you? Like, did you have that longing to have that deeper understanding with nature?
Oh, yeah. When I was in my early 20s and I was in graduate school, I lived in a little valley called Sugar Grove in North Carolina near Boone. And I swear to you, I would have been really happy being a loner wanderer in the forests for the rest of my life. I
Yeah.
was out on the trails daily. Part of the way that I learned about herbs and how to use them was trekking along with local old timers in the mountains and asking them questions, and they would point things out to me. And so it was a real on the ground, kind of boots on the ground experience, learning about plants. So not only botany, but the culture and the history and the traditions of Western herbs. And then later came Ayurvedic herbs and a smidgen of Chinese herbs, but mostly I focus on Western.
So
And
I'm sorry.
yeah, no, go
I didn't
ahead.
mean to cut you off. You had said it earlier that the name of your business was Sicilian uh
Sweet Sicily.
Sweet Sicily. Sweet Sicily. And your last name is Bella Buono.
Mhm.
And you run these retreats to Italy. So obviously we are paisano. So right. So where does your Italian heritage combine with your herbalism?
So that's a great question. Unfortunately, I don't have Italian heritage. I married into the last name,
That
Bellebuono.
counts. That counts.
And my ex-husband, his family was all from Italy. And I've been once with my daughter. It was wonderful. And then I'm going again this May. I'm co-hosting a retreat called Herbal Tuscany. And yeah, European plants, European heritage. Um, I wrote a book, a documentary book a while back called Women Healers of the World. And
Write that one down.
yeah, let me show you. So it originally came out as this big book. It's like a coffee table masterpiece kind of a book. It's
Oh,
Women Healers of the World, the Traditions, History, and Geography of Herbal Medicine.
wow.
And it's a documentary book where I interviewed, um, I think it was 30 women from various cultures all over the world, from 16 different countries, and various ways of working with plants. So there are chemists and ethnobotanists and witches and herbalists and Native American healers and Thai healers and historic healers that I did research on from the past, so from Egypt and France. And um, so I got to learn a lot about um, where we get our notions, our understanding of plant medicine and how to use plants both in the kitchen and for health. Um, it was a fantastic project, and it's come out in paper books, an edition since then. So you can't get it in this great big coffee table size anymore,
What an
but
amazing project. I can't even, I could do a whole nother interview with you asking you about like what you learned from that, what was surprising to you, like uh, how did that experience, meeting those women, learning about their traditions, change your perspective overall, broad strokes, right, into your own practices?
yeah, one of the most influential women from that project that I interviewed was in Hawaii, and she was a kahuna and a kapuna, so a healer and an elder. And she was just awesome. She was so, in a way, laid back, like this is just life, this is who I am, and in another way, so strong and so
Yeah.
powerful, and like really embodies that idea that you are this magnificent creature in and of yourself. You embody the power of the universe in you, and don't let anybody take that away from you. She was one of the most educational and inspiring people I've ever met.
Did you get to go physically go to all these places?
Not to all of them. No, I interviewed people from all over the world, and so a lot of it was on the phone.
Yeah.
I did meet a number of these women in person, either when they came to teach in the United States or I went to them, and she was one of those in Hawaii. I went to her.
Were you able to actually experience any of these women's craft? Like, did they cook for you? Did you drink tea? Did they give you, some sort of a rub or something? And if so,
Um,
what was the one that was the most exciting for you?
well, with her in particular, I expected to go to her house, and it turns out her house was a tent on the hillsides of Hawaii overlooking the ocean. And it was a big tent, it was fairly large, and it didn't have walls. It was just open on all four sides, and it had a gravel floor, and her furniture was little fold-up chairs and fold-up tables. And that's where she lived, and that's also where she worked. She practiced lomi lomi, so she did massage there in her tent. And it was in January when I went, and she was cold. She was bundled up in sweaters, and she offered me a cup of something. She asked me if I wanted something to drink, and I said, sure. And she hands me a cup of hot water. That was it. No, no tea, nothing in it. It was just hot water. And it kind of lit a spark in me. Like, to her, water is this incredibly precious energy. She overlooks the ocean. She's got streams running beside her tent to warm up and to infuse herself with energy for the day is just hot water. It's like that's all she needed.
Pure and elemental, right? Like
Hmm.
just water. And
It's witchy, right? I
it's
love it.
super witchy. It's super witchy. And also, I think like we don't realize, like I understand that I live a privileged life where I can turn on a tap and get hot or cold drinkable water at any moment in my life. And there are people right here in our country that don't have that luxury, right?
Yeah.
To have the perspective of the greatest thing she could give you in that moment was just hot water.
Hmm.
We use that word just hot water, but
Right.
it's so
It's
special.
everything. It's the fire, it's the water, it's your element. Yeah.
Right. How amazing. Wow. Wow. So, okay, so you're on this journey, you're writing about these other women and learning about herbalism from all over the globe. How does that shape you now? Like what's your focus in your herbal practice now?
So my focus is my herbal school, and it's all teaching. So I've had thousands of students. A lot of it we did in person, but now it's all almost all
Yeah.
online. And my focus is mental health, brain and mental health. So supporting other herbalists, practitioners, clinicians, um, professionals who support those with brain and mental health, and helping them integrate plants and holistic therapies into that. So, my project for the past year has really been developing and designing a curriculum that is mental health based for herbs, for helping people understand how to use herbs, because so many nurses and therapists, social workers, they never get an herbal education. It's not part of a professional schooling, right? And so even if they're working with patients who want to use herbs or who already do use herbs, they're a little bit intimidated by the idea, or they don't know where to begin, or how do you craft an herbal formula? What are the contraindications because this person's already on this medication, um, I've got courses and digital resources for specifically for clinicians to help them integrate herbs into a brain and mental health practice.
I think that's really interesting because the I can't say the word right now. The specific way you're going about uh, dealing with the mental health, right? When I talk to other herbalists, it's very generalized wellness.
Mhm.
And even if for my own practices, like generalized wellness for using herbalism and integrating my supplements or my nutrition and then met regular, regular medications, if you will. What makes mental health something that's very important to you that you want to focus on it?
So part of it is, even though you can say it's generalized or there's this over here, or there's that part over there, it's all connected. Especially when you're talking about something like anxiety or
Mm.
mild depression, and which we all experience. We all have anxious episodes, even if we're not an anxious person, we experience these feelings and these behaviors throughout our lives for whatever reason. Or it could be sadness or grief or loss. Um, and if you think about it, when we experience these things like anxiety, it affects our stomachs. We get nauseous. We get sick to our stomach. That's digestive herbal health. Or we get heart flutters. We have panic attacks. That's cardiovascular. So it's all connected. Or we break out in a rash. That's skin and endocrine and liver. And, all of these are connected. So I always recommend that people, A, study with your local herbalist if that's what you're interested in, and B, get that generalized education, because getting to know your body and the general way it performs and functions is really helpful. And then go to your specialty. It could be midwifery. Maybe you're interested in reproductive health, and that's really where your passion lies. For me, it's mental health and brain health and understanding how neurons work. And what the heck is a myelin sheath? And how do herbs and foods influence that? How can we improve mental cognition and memory and clarity naturally, without going to caffeine, without going to some sort of pill developed by a pharmaceutical corporation. How can we go out in our gardens or use that little plant that's growing in a pot on the windowsill and help ourselves feel better or help our family members feel better? So that's really where I've been putting my focus and really developing it with an eye toward professionals and clinicians and herbalists who see other people so they can spread it out to their groups and help as many people as possible.
I think that's so important. And again, specifically, like you said, like if there is a nurse or, maybe a naturopathic doctor who wants to learn more about the herbalism side of things, giving them a wider net to help people is so important. And as someone who particularly obviously struggle with all the things that I'm like, yep, anxiety, check, yep, stomach issues, check, check, check. I think it's important that we have, regular medicine and also natural medicine and putting that through the eyes of mental health is to me, it's the first step, right? It's the first step. When we start learning about, for me on my health journey right now, I'm learning a lot about gut health. And as
Mhm.
you talked about the connection between the gut and the brain and learning about vagus nerve and how those things connect.
Mhm.
Once you realize how this is affecting you, you can, I don't know about anybody else, but I can feel it. I can feel it when I start getting elevated and anxious and I get that feeling in my stomach and I'm like, oh, this is a direct correlation between what's going on in my brain. Or
Mhm.
my stomach hurts because my brain is thinking something, or my brain is thinking something because my stomach hurts. Like
Hmm.
there's so much connectivity that I believe we have been disconnected from. It's not something that people really talk about. And the work you're doing allows people to reconnect with
Hmm.
that.
And it's self-agency, it's self-empowerment. When you understand those processes and what's going on, and you also know a little bit, a basic amount about plants, you
Mhm.
can choose certain herbs to work with. And that's your ability to self-medicate, for lack of a better word. It's your ability to take care of yourself, to empower yourself, and to strengthen your emotions, your physical body naturally. Um, I think learning about herbs, even if you only you learn five, say you just choose five herbs that you really want to learn about, there's so much you can probably do with those five that it will last you a lifetime and it will help kick off the list, perhaps, pharmaceuticals that might have done you harm or had side effects like poor sleep or sexual dysfunction or whatever. Herbs tend
Mhm.
not to, for the most part. There are some that do, of course, but it's a much more natural approach, and you can take control of your health in a very smart way.
Yeah, to that
Yeah.
point, for people listening that know nothing about herbalism, what are those top five or top three mental health herbs that
Hmm.
everyone could start working with right now?
So there are dozens. And there are ideal candidates for each one. So, for instance, St. John's wort. Everybody's heard of it. It was made a big fad years back, but for good reason because it is really amazing. It's very powerful. But because it's so powerful, it's also safety contraindicated for a lot of people. So, it's one of the ones that I would say definitely try if you're not on other medications already. And it doesn't have to be like antidepressants. It could be any kind. It could be birth control. If you're on birth control, you shouldn't be taking St. John's wort. So learning about those interactions is key. Safer ones, lemon balm. It's called the gladdening herb. Uh, Roses. I use roses a lot for sadness and grief. Motherwort, um, linden, oats. A lot of these will lower blood pressure. So if you already have low blood pressure or Hashimoto's or something like that, low thyroid, you want to be careful with them. But these are really lovely herbs that build you up from the inside. And then there are adaptogen herbs like ashwagandha, tulsi, which is holy basil, so many lovely herbs that give you endurance and stamina and really help nourish the nervous system for the long term.
Yeah, that is so important. I confided in you before we began that going through a little bit of a family issue, and I have a dear friend who is studying herbalism, and she's almost finished with her course. And she gave me a tincture of ashwagandha and tulsi, and I think there's rose in there. And my husband and I have been taking it every night with tea before bed. And
Nice.
it really, really works. We sleep better, we wake up more refreshed. I can actually feel it working. I get anxious at night. So I think it's so important that people are aware that these things exist, that they are available to you. You can easily find an herbalist near you that would be able to tell you, take this one, don't take that one if you're on this medication. Like I think it's just brilliant, and specifically around the mental health, which in today's world we all need a little help with.
Yeah. And
Right?
so one of my courses, it's an Herbs for the Brain certificate course. I teach about some of the neurodegenerative diseases out there, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, ADHD, the really serious diseases.
Yeah.
And I certainly can't say that herbs will cure any of them. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But eh, thinking ahead, thinking preventatively, if you're a healthy person, but perhaps you're at risk of dementia because it's genetic or whatever, um, these are herbs that you can think of as implementing in a strengthening, forward-facing kind of a way to
Right.
nourish the brain, to support brain activity, neurotransmitter action, there's a lot that you can do preventatively or at least nourishing wise that can really support mental health.
Again, I think that mental health is the most important thing we can be doing for ourselves, especially in the world right now, in the turmoil of the world. The best thing we can do for each other is to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of each other. And the mental health part is the first step, in my opinion. I think you might have froze.
That it stopped recording. There we
Yes,
go.
I
Okay.
paused it so
Okay.
that just in case we could come back, but I just turned it back on. Um,
Perfect.
this is it's so fascinating to talk to you about mental health and herbalism, and where that meets with overall wellness. Um, and it's funny because I'm here to talk to you about your new book, which has nothing
Right.
to do with herbalism.
It's not about that at
It's
all.
not about herbalism at all, but I love that this is your perspective and where you're coming from, with your business, and your background is about healing and self improvement and taking care of oneself, and your passion for helping others take care of each other comes through in your herbalist work, right? So
Thanks.
yeah, absolutely. I'm like, again, I could talk to you about the mental health stuff and the nervous system. I could talk, I love that stuff. I sometimes I get a little carried away, and I'll say to my partner, babe, I just read this thing about the vagus nerve and this thing. And he's like, can we just eat our salad? And I'm like, no, it's about these ingredients. So forgive me if I get a little off the rails there. Okay, so what I would like to do is I would like to take a quick break, hear from our sponsors, and then I want to dive into your new book, which has nothing to do with herbalism.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. We are chatting with Holly Bella Buono, and we've been talking all about herbalism and mental health and herbalism because that's part of your background. That's the giant part of your work in this world. And so now you have this new book out called Once Upon a Place, which is zero to do with herbalism.
Right.
And I have to tell you, I was immediately when Llewellyn Books reached out to me, I was immediately intrigued by this book, not knowing your background, not knowing you were this amazing herbal healer, not knowing anything. I was like, this book sounds really cool, and then read the description and read through, the galley copy, and I was like, this is very cool stuff, and it's a real interesting take on kind of like personal transformation and inspired by all these archetypal places, actual physical places. So first of all, why in the world did you decide to write this book as such a divergence from the work that you often do?
So I think your audience will probably appreciate this story. So the book came from literally, so I've been an herbalist. We've been talking about my herbal
Right?
apothecary. I sold my herbal apothecary one autumn, went through months of the sales process and documents and everything. And then it was tax season, and I went through months of, all the paperwork. And I completed both of those. And I remember standing in my living room and I looked around and I literally said out loud, okay, what's next? And the idea for this entire book came into my head. And it was all about water and primeval energy and fairy tales and symbolism and the hero's journey. And it was like a whirlwind in my brain. And so that was like 7 years ago. I've spent the past 7 years working on this project.
Oh,
Not full time, of course, but little salvaging little moments here and there where I can work on the manuscript. And it's grown and it's grown, and I'm super excited about it coming out. It feels like holding a baby, you know? This is
yes.
my eighth book to be published.
Wow.
Every one of them, I felt like I was pregnant.
Yeah, yeah. It's a labor of love, especially when
Mhm.
you do something that's kind of a little bit off from what you usually do, right? And you're like, look at this unique little beautiful thing that I made. And it's really, really cool. It's really cool. It's called Once Upon a Place, Forest Caverns, and Other Places of Transformation in Myth, Fairy Tales, and Films. So I myself, super nerd, love pop culture, love fairy tales, love, all the fantasy movies from the 80s. So I'm immediately like, when I saw this, I was like, okay, I'm immediately intrigued by this. So
Great.
talk to us a little bit about the archetypes of the places that
Yeah.
you go
So,
into in this book.
yeah. So a lot of people are familiar with Joseph Campbell. He was the mythologist. He taught at Sarah Lawrence University, especially in the 80s, I think is when he really was in his heyday. And he is the one who's most credited with looking at all the myths of the world and showing us how they're interconnected and relate to each other, and pointing out the symbolism of mythology, and especially what he called the hero's journey, the process,
Mhm.
which are the steps you take when you are growing emotionally, spiritually, and they appear as a quest or an adventure story. And so a lot of us are familiar with that process of the hero's journey. But what I realized is that nobody talks about where that hero's journey happens. And so the basic premise of this book is these are the places you go when you're on that quest, when you're taking that adventure, and it's metaphoric. All of the characters in these stories, whether they're from myths or fairy tales or folk tales or adventure films, they are going to what I narrowed down to five specific places.
Mhm.
So we've got um, the cavern, the deep, which is the ocean, the vessel, the forest, and the labyrinth. And pretty much every quest story that you come across has the character going into one of these five places. And what that does is it sends the character of the story into a metaphorical realm where they face certain obstacles or challenges where that location itself influences their journey. And
Mhm.
as a reader, we can read that and say, yeah, that's a metaphor for when I got my divorce and I was going through this hellacious period that was really hard and difficult and I struggled. Um, and I was in this place of the abyss or darkness or uncomfort. And eventually I rose out of it and I was stronger than I was even before. And um, I got some epiphanies along the way and I learned a lot and it was enlightening. And that's really basically what an epic journey is this process of going through a hardship, facing beasts, hopefully getting some guides, um, working through chaos and void, doing this process of descent and resurrection where you go down and then you come up, and ultimately being an even stronger person at the end. It's that journey of transformation, whether it's puberty, because you're a kid turning into an adult, or it's you're facing a really harsh situation, whether it's through your job or a relationship, or just your self image, your self worth. You know,
Yeah.
all of us go through these situations. None of us has it 100% easy. And if we did, it would suck because then we wouldn't grow.
Right.
You know,
Right.
we really do need these
That-
opportunities.
yes. And that journey is often about not just getting through it, right? But it's also about the discovery of who you are based on the choices you make
Exactly.
in that place at that time,
Yes.
right? Because you might find yourself just like we see our beloved characters in stories and movies. And again, I'm a huge nerd. So the first thing that comes to mind for me is Harry Potter, right?
Right.
And he goes into the deep and then he goes, he goes into a cave and then he's in the water and then he goes through fire and then he goes into the dark forest. And every single challenge, this main character has to make a choice about how to get, first of all, how to make a choice to go into it in the first place.
Right.
And then how do I get out of it? And then what I learned about myself from the choices I made when I was in that situation.
And the choice to go in the first place is a good point because in the book I talk about different triggers. What can trigger a character to go into this horrifying situation in the first place? And sometimes people are pushed. Like it's their time and they're too scared to do it. And so someone else literally pushes them into a situation that they need to experience to move on. And other times they go in willingly. And in the stories, what I learned was that there were a number of reasons why people would go in willingly. One is to save someone else.
Mm,
Think about it's the movie It's a Wonderful Life,
mm,
and it's the Christmas movie, right? And the main character is feeling horrible, and he goes out on a bridge, and he wants to end it on the
yeah,
bridge, jumping into the water.
yeah,
But Clarence, the angel, shows up and jumps in first. And it surprises him. And he jumps in to save Clarence. And that's when his journey begins.
mhm,
So a lot of the stories throughout time in various cultures, that's been a trigger, is that you go in to save someone else.
yeah.
Or a lot of people go in with the desire to learn something about the afterworld. That's been a historic reason for people entering this descent and resurrection type of journey is that they want to learn what happened to someone who died or what's going to happen when I die.
Right.
Um, there's the story of Gilgamesh, who was this ancient king or warrior. It's like a 4,000-year-old story. It's one of the oldest stories we have. And his whole intent was to find immortality and not die. He wanted to learn how to be immortal. And so that set off his entire quest. So
Wow.
lots of different reasons that are very individual. And I personally think, I think we go on these descent and resurrection journeys throughout our lives.
Absolutely.
Some are more horrible and life-changing than others, but it's not just a one and done. These are experiences that shape us over the course of decades. And I think we all experience various triggers. Sometimes we're pushed, sometimes we go willingly, sometimes we want to learn and grow. So it's these are metaphors and images that help us see that we're not alone, that we all go through
Mm,
these, and that
mhm,
when we're facing something, we could step back and look at it metaphorically. We're experiencing the pain of whatever our situation is, but if we step back, we can say, maybe this is a learning experience. Maybe something good can come from this. I have to be open to the mentors and the guides in my life.
mm,
I have to be able to correctly identify the beast over there and not be wishy-washy or give them the benefit of the doubt. I have to stand strong and say, yeah, that's the beast.
mhm.
That's the person I want to get away from and do it. So many lessons that we can learn if we step back and we look at this symbolism and then apply it to our own lives.
And often when we're going through those places, right, when we're in those places in our mind, whether we are in a cavern in our life, again, metaphorically speaking, or, we feel like we're drowning, we're in the deep, we can't breathe, whatever that situation is, and we've all been there, right? Um, what happens on the other side will denote how we handle the next journey, right?
Exactly.
Right. And as we're talking about this, it's impossible to not like start thinking about your own life and where you're at and where you've come from. And one of the things I say just to myself and to other people when they're going through something is you have survived 100% of the bad days that you've had, right? So if you happen to be in one of these places in your life right now on your own personal hero's journey, everybody comes through it. You are the hero of your story. Heroes come through it. It sucks. You're going to be battered. You're going to be exhausted. You may lose things, you may gain things, but you're going to come through it. Is that
Yeah.
also a common theme?
It is. It's really common. And in fact, in the book, I share three instances of stories where the hero doesn't succeed. And I don't want to share them now because go to the book and you'll learn them there. But there's only three.
Right.
There's only three that I've been able to come up with where it's a powerful, popular story and it ends in defeat. So that just shows you the vast majority of storytellers have throughout history and time and culture been very keen on showing us that we succeed.
We are infinitely powerful.
Hmm.
In times in my personal life where I have had very hard moments or I've been in scary places, there are stories that I turn to every time. One of them, you're gonna laugh at this because it's so stupid, but it's Disney's Mulan. Okay,
Oh yeah.
I am a 45-year-old woman, and when I feel like I cannot go on, I will watch Mulan. And I watch that and I go, if she did that, I can do this. She did that because she chose to prove to everyone else that she could. She didn't give up when she was given the chance to give up. She kept going. And for whatever reason, when I saw that when I was a child, it spoke to me. And today in my adult life, it still speaks to me on that soul level, right?
Hmm.
Is there a story in your book that speaks to you in that way?
There is. But before I go there, I want to just comment on what you just said about it's this girl's journey, right? And that's something else that I bring up in the book is Joseph Campbell created the hero's journey, or he talked about the hero's journey, not the heroine's journey. And that's one thing I wanted to bring out in this book was that women have a very special type of journey.
Mm.
And it's different from a man's experience. It's not better or worse, but it's different. And to be able to
Mhm.
acknowledge that and see where a woman goes and what she deals with and what her obstacles are and what her perseverance means to her life and her community is really important to be able to see that in stories because you were talking about Mulan. One of the things that I think of is Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings. I love the
Mhm.
symbolism and the
Mhm.
beauty and the magic of it, but it is primarily about men. It's
Yes.
very man-oriented, quite full of testosterone, to be honest.
Yes.
And and being able to pull out of there the little gemstones of women's experience, that's one of the things that I found really rewarding about writing this book was looking at all the stories and seeing the women's heroine's journey.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Because we do need that. And I definitely feel like now in modern storytelling, little girls are seeing themselves, young women are seeing themselves much more than I did when I was a child.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'm glad that you highlight that in this book for sure.
Yeah, it's really important. So, for your question, one of the stories that really speaks to me is it's out of Africa and it's I want to say Ethiopia, but I can't remember exactly. I call the main character Misiti, even though in the folk tales that I read, she didn't have a name; she was just called the wife. So it's about a husband and wife who their marriage is a little bit rocky, and so Misiti, the wife, goes to the village elder and says, "Do you have a magic potion that you can give us to fix our marriage, spark the romance, help us get back on track?" And the village elder says, I can make you a magic potion, but you have to do something that's very difficult in order for this to happen. And he says, what you have to do is you have to go deep into the jungle, which in the locations of my book would be the forest. And you have to find a wild lion and pluck a whisker off of that lion's chin and bring me the whisker back. And then I'll make your magic potion. And Missy T is terrified. She's like, that's insane. I don't want to go into the jungle and go up to a wild lion and especially rip a hair off of this lion's chin.
Right?
That's a death wish. But she's determined. And so the next day, she gets a cut of meat from a local butcher and she treks deep into the jungle, farther and farther down these trails through the woods where there's no signpost. it's chaos. And she ends up in the very depths of the jungle and she hides behind a tree. And on the other side of the tree is a little stream, and on the other bank is a wild lion. And it's sitting there lapping water from the stream. And her heart flutters and she almost gives up and turns around, but instead she takes the chunk of meat and she flings it across the creek to the lion. And the lion eats it up. She turns around, runs back out of the jungle, and goes back home. So the next day, she gets another chunk of meat and she goes back into the jungle. And instead of hiding behind the tree, she leans out from the tree, throws the chunk of meat, turns away, and runs back. And every day she returns, moving a little bit closer and closer to the lion until finally she crosses the creek and she sits next to the lion while he's lapping the water. And she reaches over and she plucks out a whisker from his chin and returns back to her village. And when she does that, she gets back to the elder who is astonished. And the elder tells her, I don't need this whisker. You have proven everything about yourself, that you have courage, that you have determination, what your values are. You don't need me. You don't need a magic potion. You've got it in you this whole time.
That actually made me really emotional. Um, wow. Wow, what a beautiful story. Why is that story? What does that story mean to you? Why does it?
It really resonates with me. I mean, here's a woman who's being told, um, or who believes that there's something external, a magic potion that's going to make her life better, when actually, it's within her the whole time. It kind of reminds me of Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, right? When she's told at the end, you had the power to go home all along. It's that same kind of inner strength, that revelation that you don't need anything out there. It's in you. And
Right.
it's all what you make with your own life and what you do with it.
Mhm.
I just think that's so important for girls and young women in particular, everyone, but especially for those of us who have been taught or trained to look elsewhere for power or strength or success.
Validation
Hmm.
or love for, oh, someone else, the external locus of personality,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm only who I am because you think this way about me, instead of saying, this is how I think about me, and it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what you think.
Yeah. I think that's a key
That's
part of all of
beautiful.
these stories.
Yeah.
Is finding that center locus, as you call it. That's what I came across time and again with these stories as I did my research, was that's what these storytellers from long ago are really trying to get us to understand, is that we've got it inside us and it's beautiful.
Amazing. I do want to ask you, there was one part of the book that I thought was really, really interesting, and we are running out of time, but I do want to touch on this. You go in depth to talk about chaos and the void and their differences and similarities. Can you just give us a little, because that was really interesting for me. Um, can you talk a little bit about the differences and the similarities between chaos and void and how
Yeah,
that
yeah.
plays into our own journeys?
I just think it's fascinating. So one thing that became apparent to me as I researched this book was that you need one or the other or both on your quest. So whenever you're facing a difficult situation in your life, or you're reading a story where it's metaphoric, the character is going through either chaos or void or both. And chaos is where, as we all know, it's chaotic. There are no roads, there are no paths, there are no signs, there are no doorways. You're having to pry apart trees and branches and thorns to get to where you want to be. Void is just the opposite. It's emptiness, it's nothingness. But because it's so nothing, there still are no signposts or doors or pathways or roads. And you're having to um, mentally look at nothingness around you to get to where you want to be. So, in a way, they're opposite, and in a way, they're the same.
Yeah.
They present a challenge that you have to work through, um, and you have to do it on your own because there's no structure to support you.
Right. They
And a good
both feel
way,
like falling.
right. One of the films that I came across that was really good at showing this was Maze Runner and um, not Blade Runner.
I
That's
was
a
gonna say
different one.
not Blade Runner,
No,
Maze Runner.
Maze Runner. Um, and I can't remember who the director was right now, but basically it's these people end up in a meadow. They don't know how they got there. They've got amnesia. It's an empty meadow. There's nothing. There's no indication of who they are, why they're there. It's the void. Until the story picks up because one of the main characters decides, this isn't my fate. I want something different. He ends up finding a door or a portal, some sort of doorway on the edge of the meadow. And he goes through it, and it's a labyrinth. It's a maze of hallways and walls and more doorways. And basically, it's chaos, right? He's in this place where there's so many options, and it's a real stark comparison between the void and chaos. And what's interesting about this film is when they finally all get out and get back to real life and things are resolved, where they come out is it's an office. It's filled with telephones and computer machines and fax machines, and basically it's connection. And so they've
Oh,
worked their way through chaos and void to connect with others.
wow.
It's a really
Wow.
cool way of showing those metaphors.
That is so cool. Um, right? Because isn't that kind of like the whole point?
Right.
Right? The whole point. Um, this is just, it's a fascinating book, Once Upon a Place. Um, and it's like you said, it's your eighth book. You have a whole library of books on herbalism and the healing kitchen, food, using food as medicine book. You've got such a broad uh vocabulary of books that you have written, and the goodness and healing that you bring into the world with your work is really fantastic. Holly, tell us where we can find you and follow you, and then tell me all about your Tuscany trip that's coming up that I absolutely can't go on because I already have plans for May, but oh my goodness.
Yeah, so people can find me at my herb school, which is school.hollybellebuono.com. And my whole course catalog is on there. I've got beginner courses, certificate courses, and CEU approved courses um, on brain and mental health, but also lots of other topics in herbal medicine. And my my Italy trip is May 24th through June 4th. We've got 3 spaces left, so it's getting down to the wire. If anybody's interested in going, definitely sign up now. It's going to be visiting botanical gardens and herbal sanctuaries, an essential oil farm, um, hot springs and spa, and then eating. That's what I'm mostly looking forward to is eating all the amazing Italian food.
Yes, yes. And where can we buy Once Upon a Place?
You can get that anywhere books are sold. So your local bookstore should have it. The major outlets all have it. And if you want it an autographed copy, you can get it from me at hollybellebuono.com.
And if we want to follow you online,
Yeah, Facebook and Instagram at Holly Bellebuono.
amazing. And we'll put all of that in the show notes so people can just go right there and click and follow. This book is really awesome. It's out now. Once Upon a Place. Yeah, this is so exciting. It's really interesting and it's such a new take on going through your life's journeys and like I said, those archetypes and that sort of like deeper introspection of how we go through things, looking at them through this lens. It's for me, it's really eye-opening because I am such a story lover and a movie lover. So I found it really, I don't know, poignant. Um, so
Thank you.
Holly, I have one last question. I ask this to everyone that comes on the show. Has nothing to do with anything we spoke about today. I am a kitchen witch. If you were to have me cook for you one magical meal, what would it be and why?
I would ask you to make me rose petal rice pudding.
How specific.
It's one of my favorite dishes, and we were talking about herbs earlier and roses, and they are magical in the kitchen for sure.
Yes.
Um, I would want a creamy, delectable rose petal rice pudding.
Now that is something I have never ever made. What I'm gonna have to like develop that rose petal rice pudding recipe. Wow.
With a
I
little bit of vanilla and cinnamon.
It must be incredible. I have made a rose petal or rose water vanilla latte because I'm a big coffee
Ooh.
person.
Uh-huh.
So just that little hint of rose is wonderful. And I've also made what's called a Persian love cake, which is done with pistachio, rose, and cardamom.
Oh, wow.
And in my book, Kitchen Witch's Guide to Love and Romance, I have a red velvet cake with a rose petal frosting. But
Nice.
I haven't tried it in rice pudding. You have challenged me, my friend. I love it. Thank
I'll
you.
be over for dinner next
Yes.
week.
Yes. I mean, you're so close. Thank you so much for being here. It was absolutely delightful to get to know you. Everyone
Thank
go
you.
by Once Upon a Place. Thank you for being here. I hope you had fun.
I did. It was so good. Thank you, Dawn.
It's my pleasure. And until next time, everyone, I wish you so many blessings and so much gratitude.